Hello everyone, Catweazle here, welcome to the channel and welcome back to our brand new segment. Yes, our paint through of Conan, Catweazle, Daubs, Conan, and we're just about to get cracking with Conan. And just before we do, just go over a few things. First of all, what we had to do, we had to prep all of our minis that we were going to paint, so that means taking all the flash off and just making sure there's no bits of plastic sticking out anywhere that shouldn't be, so you just get rid of those with a craft knife or a file or something similar, and then you prime your minis. Now, I did say I was going to prime Conan live. I was going to prime him with the acrylic gesso and just paint it on due to the weather, the way it's been. And I did start doing all of the minis with the gesso here, and just as an example, here's Shivatas, and as you see, he came up pretty well with using the gesso there. But while I was actually doing that, I decided to do all of the other minis first and just leave it till the end to do Conan. And while I was doing it, I noticed that the sun was streaming in through the window, and I just thought, what an idiot! We've actually got a nice day for a change. So what I did, I was right near the end. I was just finishing off the picked hunters, and I just finished those off with the gesso, and then just to save time, I actually sprayed Conan. So Conan has actually been spray painted, spray primed. So he is slightly different, but I thought it'd be good to see the difference between the two. And as you can see, obviously there are a few brush marks because this was actually brushed on the gesso compared to the actual Conan here, who was spray primed, but the difference isn't huge. As you can see, they both go on really well, and even though it's a bit gloppy, the gesso, it dries fantastically well. So just as good, but it does take longer. If you do get a sunny day like I got, use a spray primer. It's much quicker, as I know, because I spent 2 hours on the rest of the guys that I'm going to paint. But at least that does show a comparison between the two. And yeah, if a professional was actually doing these, you know, and trying to make them display level minis, he wouldn't paint gesso on, because you do get slight brush marks. Can you see them there? And oh, they won't put up with brush marks. But for the level that we're doing, which is tabletop standard, that'll be absolutely fine. So I'll put Shivatas back. We'll be painting him later, and we'll get on with our friend here, Conan, who we are going to be painting. So he is all ready to go. We've primed him, so all of our paint will be able to go on him, no problem. So we'll pop him there just for the time being. What paints are we going to use? Well, I've took out a selection. It'll appear there's quite a few, but a lot of these will be used just for highlighting, so they won't be used very much at all. So I'll go from left to right. I'm going to use ash grey. This is going to be a highlight for his hair. And his hair is actually going to be Necromancer's cloak. Now, this isn't black. It's a very, very dark grey. The reason for that is, if you use black, like matte black, it's very difficult to get any sort of depth to it. It just looks very flat. So we'll use a dark grey with a wash, and then the ash grey will do the highlights on his hair. Then Conan does have a little bit of leather. We'll have a look here. On his loincloth, as you can see, it's got a bit of texture on there. That is fur. So we're going to use a colour for the fur. And just a bit above that, you can see that there is like a belt. That's going to be a slightly different colour. He's also got some things hanging off his belt. A couple of those will make silver, just to make out the metal, and a couple of others will do a sort of a bone colour. You'll also see that the fur is sort of poking above the belt as well, so we'll have to make sure that we get that. If we go around to the front, again, same sort of deal. He has the fur, There's a bit of a loincloth showing underneath. Again, we'll do that in a slightly different colour. And you can see his belt buckle there. We'll do belt buckle in a metal colour. Not decided whether I'll do it gold or silver yet. So that's what the browns are for. In addition, the brown will be used on his hand wraps. He's got a hand wrap here with some spikes on it, and he's got a normal hand wrap here without spikes on it. We'll do those the same colour leather, and the spikes we will do a metallic colour. But the vast, and obviously his boots as well. His boots sort of have fur at the top. They do have a few rings on them that we will do metallic. And then we have the basic boots underneath that. So the fur at the top will be a slightly different colour than the boot itself. Generally the boot itself has been tanned, but the top bit where the fur is, that hasn't been tanned, so we'll do that a slightly different colour. You can do them, you know, one flat colour for brown. You don't have to change the colours around like I'm going to do. It's oh, I'm taking him out of the light then. You can see him a bit better now. But I just like to have my browns a slightly different colour. You can do it the same colour and use different shade. So if you use a darker shade, it will make the leather look darker. So you can do it that way. So you can paint, for example, the boots all one colour brown, but the top of the boots use a lighter shade than the bottom of the boot, for example. You can do that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to use a slightly different different colour of brown. So the browns that we're going to use, some of these will be used as highlights as well. Leather brown, surprisingly enough, always a good one. We're going to use oak brown, which is slightly darker. We're also going to use monster brown, which is a nice light brown. And we're going to use fur brown, which is a slightly reddish brown. So probably fur brown and monster brown and oak brown. And the leather brown we might keep for a highlight for the really dark brown, and we'll use monster brown as a highlight for the mid brown that we're going to use. However, the vast majority of this miniature is actually flesh, because it's Conan and he runs around with just a loincloth on. So for that we're actually going to use a Barbarian flesh, which is a nice light flesh colour. Now, he does spend a lot of his time outside, but the thing about Barbarian flesh is once we put a shade on it, then it will darken up. We'll see how dark it goes. If it's not dark enough, if it's not tanned enough, we'll see what we can do. Yeah, but generally I'm expecting that to actually darken up rather nicely, give him a nice tanned look. For his sword and various small metal bits, he does have small bits of metal jewellery on his belt, and he's got a sort of bangle on his arm there. We will be using gunmetal. Now this is a sort of dark silver metallic. That's going to be our sort of base coat for that. We're going to use plate mail metal, which is slightly brighter. We're going to use that, for example, to highlight the sword, but also on the edges of the sword, because the sword is busy cutting people up. So it will be, you know, notched and worn at the edges. So that will brighten the edges up. So we'll use plate mail on that. For the hilt and the pommel, we'll use some greedy gold, and we might use this on his belt buckle as well. The reason I'm using greedy gold, again this is quite a dark gold, is he's not very flashy, Conan. Even when he becomes king of Aquilonia, I always get the idea that all the finery he's wearing, it's a bit, you know, there might be the odd rip there, here and there. He understands the need to dress as a royal, but he's a barbarian at heart, and he just struggles a bit. You know, he's not a fop. So all of his sort of gear and everything, it's a bit dark, it's a bit tatty. So that's the sort of look that we're going for. And two other colours that I've got are the matte white and the matte black. And what we're using these for, we may have to darken or lighten some of our colours for highlighting, or we just want something, you know, a bit darker. As I said in the previous video, because miniatures are by definition miniature, they have trouble making their own contrast because they're so small. So we've got to accentuate that contrast between the light and dark. So we'll use matte black and matte white for that. So we'll pop him down there. The primer is fully dried, so we are ready to go. What we're going to start with is we're going to go... There are some things to bear in mind when you decide what you're going to paint first. One is, what is the major colour that you're going to be using? In this case, it's going to be Barbarian flesh, because he's pretty much all flesh. Another thing to bear in mind is, what's your lightest colour? Sometimes, like, we're going to use the flesh here because one, it's a light colour and it covers most of the mini as well. But some minis, you may make the decision to go, you know what, it's pretty much the same sort of levels of each colour. I'm going to go with the light one first, then the dark one, which is usually, that's a good rule of thumb. Another one is going from inside to out. So it's quite easy, Conan. He's a pretty easy mini to do because he's virtually all flesh. But some miniatures, they're very involved. They've got a lot of bits on them that you've got to paint in and paint around, and then it's normally a good idea to start from the inside and work your way out, because the inside is the most difficult to paint. So it doesn't matter if you go over another part of the miniature, because as you move outside with your painting, you'll cover up any, you know, where you've gone over, because the difficult areas of the miniature, you know, there's a good chance that you're going to paint outside the lines, as it were. And as you go outside, you can obviously make corrections as you go. So, but we're going to use flesh for this guy because he's virtually all flesh. And we have here our wet palette, and it is wet. You probably can't see it because it's not swimming. Don't have it swimming. Looks yellow, but it isn't yellow. That's just the absorbent cloth underneath the actual what is it, the sort of baking paper that we're using, and beneath that there is there's a piece of sponge which is obviously full of water. So the only reason it looks yellow is because obviously the baking paper has gone a bit translucent. So that's all ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some Barbarian flesh on there. Now we've got to give this a good shake, because I haven't used these paint for ages. I have shook them because I was anticipating we were going to be doing this. So I have shook them, but I'll shake it again. Always shake your paints. Remember, they are a mixture and you need to get the pigment and the medium all mixed together. So we've done that, and then there we go, and a bit of pigment sticking out the top there, and we'll bob that onto our wet palette. Out you go. So there we go, put a nice blob in there. Now we're going to thin that out slightly, because we don't want a thick lot of paint going on to Conan. We don't want to cover up all the detail. It's better to do a succession of thin coats. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our old dropper here. So I've just got a little bit of a dropper. Just going to put a tiny bit of water onto that. There's a little bit of water obviously coming up from the wet palette as well. Then we're going to use our brush, which is our good brush. So we're going to be using our Raphael. And what we've got to do is give that a tiny bit of a mix. There we go. Just want a a good consistency. And we want to load up the end of our brush so all the bristles have got good coverage on there. What I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to zoom in a little because you want to see me doing the actual painting. So be back in a moment and we will kick off. And here we are, we've zoomed in a bit there. Got to be very careful here because I want to make sure that I keep him in shot. So we'll start on the back because this is the first time we've loaded up this brush and I want a nice big space just in case, you know, it all splurges on. So let's get cracking. It's got really excellent definition, this mini, on his musculature. So we'll be hoping to bring that out. Don't worry if you go across things, like I've just gone across a bit. I've just gone across a bit of the of his loincloth there, but don't worry about it because we will be painting over that later. The brown will be a darker colour, so it will be very easy to paint over. And he's got his bangle there. Again, if we go over that, it's not a big deal. Now there will be parts of, I've probably just done it now, I will be concentrating and I'll probably fast forward the video. So there will be times whereby you'll just see the video fast forward and I'll just stop the video like now when I'm explaining something. But let's get back to fast forward. Occasionally you'll find you're going to have to hold the mini at odd angles. So apologies if you're having trouble seeing this. I'm just trying to get his inner thigh done. Sorry, Conan. Suits you, sir. Suits you. Oh, there we go. Right. And next we've got to do his hands. So quickly do his hands. But we've got to be careful. He does have like a hand wrap here. While it wouldn't be the end of the world if we went over his hand wrap, it's sort of going through his fingers. The less that you go over something is the less corrections you've got to make. So if you can manage to avoid going over what you can, you just save yourself a little bit of time. As I say, don't worry about it, but do what you can. There you go, can you see? There's that little V there, right next to the sword hilt. So that'll be coloured as leather. Let's do his other hand. You can see that. A little bit of handshake here. I am using this to rest my hands on, but normally I'd have it a lot closer to my face due to my fantastic eyesight. So if I do get a bit of handshake, I do apologise. Okay, right, so there we go. That's the first coat. The reason we're going to give him another coat is because it was a thin coat, and you can see these bits, you know, it's just the coverage isn't really good. What you're looking for in a base coat is a good flat coverage. It's okay it's being flat, because we're going to up the definition, up the contrast between light and dark later. So if you can get a good flat coverage of your base coat, that is exactly what you're going for. But the way we're going to do it is we're going to do it in two thin coats rather than one thick coat. While we want that flat coverage, we don't want it to cover the details of the Mini. So I'm going to let him dry for a while. And while that's drying, I will wash my brush in water. No need to clean it with the soap, we haven't finished. But rather than leave any paint on it for any length of time, make sure, you know, that you get it nice and clean again. And what you can also do is it just gets the point back. And that'll be ready for, it'll be about 5 minutes, and I'll just come back. I'm going to make sure that he dries completely. That's another tip I've got. You can get a little impatient when miniature painting, and you know, people just love to, like, oh, it's dry, and you know, they'll start on the next thing. What'll happen if your paint isn't fully dry, you'll get things like bleed, or if like you're doing a second coat. Excuse me, I have a call. I'll be back shortly. And I'm back. That was Mrs. Catweazle sorting out tea for tonight. Isn't she lovely? But it's a good job she did ring, because I'm an idiot. Before we let it completely dry, we've got to put the flesh colour on his face. That is just me yabbering on that. So, yeah. So, we'll do his face, shall we? That's always a good idea. Where I was talking about putting on thin coats, this is where it's really important on the face, because that is where a hell of a lot of detail is. So, it really does. To make sure that you put some nice thin coats on here, and then none of his facial features are obscured by having a big blob of thick paint over it. Right, there we go. Just make sure I've got all his neck. So you can't see that, can you? Because my hand was in the way. Right, there we go. We'll let him dry, as I said. What I was talking about was the importance of letting coats dry. One, you don't want to start... If it's a big Mini, you can start on a different part of the Mini, as long as it's nowhere near what you've just painted. But I wouldn't recommend doing it. You can get bleed, because... your previous coat is still wet and it'll bleed into whatever else that you're doing, and it just looks yuck. And if you start a second coat before the first one's dry, it just, the sort of half congealed, half dried paint causes an absolute nightmare with the second coat that goes on. It's just a question of patience. All you've got to do is just let it completely dry. This is a very thin coat that I've put on. It's not going to take long. It's going to take 5 minutes at the most. We can just afford to let it dry. And I've had to wash my brush twice there due to my idiocy, missing out on painting his face. I'll be back in 5 minutes, But good thing to point out now that I recall it. This seems a good time to mention something. While you're actually painting, I mean, I'm doing a YouTube video, so I'm whittering on. But normally, what I'd do when I was painting is I'd have something on in the background, either music or an audio book or something like that, and it just really helps you take your time. If you haven't got anything like that in the background, you know, you can get a bit impatient and get a bit into like, oh, this is what I'm doing. What I'm doing is actually painting, and I've got to get on with it, and I haven't got enough time, and or you know, and you have got more time than you think. You have got a couple of minutes to let something dry before you carry on. And if you've got an audio book on or some music on, then you know that's an ideal opportunity to do a couple of things at once. So that's what I normally do, listen to some music or an audio book. In fact, while I was doing the gesso painting of all the other miniatures on the priming, I was actually listening to a Conan audio book. Unfortunately, I can't play that for you guys because I'll get into trouble. Copyright and all that. But it is a very relaxing way to paint. Anyway, I'll be back in a few minutes and we'll put Conan's second flesh tone coat on. Hello and welcome back. Yes, he's all dry and he's ready for his second coat. A bit longer than expected because I missed something else out. Just look here. I just missed in between that bangle and his hand wrap here, so I had to go in and do that as well. So apart from me forgetting to like paint half the model, we're doing great. So let's get on with the second coat. So pop that in there. We'll start on his back again and let's get going. Okay, there we go. I think we've pretty much given him his second coat there. And as you can see, it's a lot more even now. Nice thin coats, and it's covered him nice and evenly. We haven't lost any of his detail. And all we've got to do now is we're going to let that dry. Again, another 5 minutes. I'm just going to let that dry. I'll wash my brush again because we will be changing colour, because we will start painting the some of the leather once he's dry. So there we go, the flesh is done. I might take a little picture of that and we'll pop that on Instagram and it just show the different steps. So another quick look at him as he's drying. As you see, we've got a nice even coat there. Flesh, you know, it's slightly, it's pale, but it's only slightly, it's not too pale. I think once we put a wash on that, it'll darken up nicely and he'll look nice and tanned. Okay, I shall see you shortly by the miracle of editing. And I'm back, and good old Conan, he's nice and dry now. There he is. Looking cool. Right, we'll just leave him on top of there for the time being. I'll put my helmet on And switch the light on. Okay, what we're going to do next? Well, we're going to start with his leather. So remember I was talking about painting inside and out. So start on the inside where it's tricky and then painting out. We're going to do that. We're going to use, where's leather brown? We are going to use leather brown. And we're going to start those difficult to reach places. And so give this a good shake and pop a bit out on the old wet palette. We don't need a lot. And put that back. Get a tip of our brush a little bit wet. Just do that in the wet palette. And then we will dab it into our leather brown. Okay, just make sure everybody can see everything. Excellent. Right, what we're looking to do here is paint inside out, because there's some tricky parts to get to. We're not going to do the fur, that's quite easy to get to, but there is a sort of belt that's running across here, and it gets very tricky in there. So because I've just filled up the paintbrush and we probably have a little bit of excess, I'm going to start on the back bit here. Just checking you can see. Unfortunately my hand's probably going to get in the way a bit. I do apologise. So just going to paint through here. It's just like a thin belt, and as you can see, that white there, that's where the fur is overlapping the belt. So we're going to use that, and I think the fur is coming right over the belt there, and right over the belt bit at the front here, because yes, where his sword is, he sort of dragged it to his body, so that's pulled the fur up and it's covered the belt. So we only need to do that little bit there, and then we can see a tiny bit of it here, and it's just next to the belt buckle. Now I am going to get some of this over areas I shouldn't, like the sword, but that's fine because we're going to do that later. I've got a bit over the belt buckle there. Don't worry, it's fine. It's all under control. Can we still see it? Yeah, so I've got a little bit there down over the belt buckle and the sword, but it's okay. And a tiny bit in there. Like that. In fact, can I? I think I will. I think we can draw it. Draw it through here. Yes, that's fine actually. Don't see too much of it there because of the sword hilt, where it's in the way. Can I draw it across? No, that definitely looks like there is some fur overhanging there. This looks like the fur is just totally overhanging the belt. So we've popped that in, but before we finish, we're also going to use this on the boots down here. May as well do it now while we're here. Can we see that? I've got to move that up. Apologies. Could see it, but not very well. Okay, so there we go. We've got the bottom of the boots done, and we've got the sort of belt there. The effect we're trying to go through here, don't know if you've noticed if you've ever seen a pelt or anything, one side with the fur on, it's a different colour from the inside, the part of the pelt that doesn't have the fur on, and there's generally a colour difference. We're going to go with a redder brown for the fur, sort of bare fur, and obviously the lower boot and the belt up here, we've done it, that doesn't have the fur on. Yeah, so the fur's been taken off, or it's the inside of the pelt, and that is going to be leather brown. We've got some other browns that we're going to use. I'm going to use a lighter brown on the hand wraps, and obviously the redder brown on the fur, and probably use the lighter brown when it comes to doing a bit of highlighting later. So there we go, that's the first set of brown on his boots and his belt. We'll let that dry. I may put a second coat on before I come back, and then we will do another of the browns. I'm going to let this dry because one of the worst things for bleed is, you know, putting browns next to each other and then they bleed together. And you just end up with one homogeneous brown. So I will let these dry, and as I say, I'll probably pop a quick second coat on, but you don't need to see that. And I'll come back when it's all ready for the next shade of brown. So see you in a minute. Okay, welcome back. Yes, he's dried now. So boots are dry, his belt's dry. What I also did was I noticed there was a little leather grip on the handle there, so I've coloured that the same colour as well. It's sort of hand grip just between the hilt and the pommel, so I've coloured that in the same leather brown. So what we're going to do next, I think we will do the fur next, and as mentioned we'll use the fur brown because if you look at his actual pictures in the game, it does seem to be a reddish brown sort of loincloth that he's got on. Probably a bear, but it's totally up to you what colour that you want to make his loincloth. If you want him to have a wolf pelt, for example, then just use a grey. But I'm going to be using this fur brown. Put a blob onto our wet palette. And there we go. And let's just get our brush in there. Oh yeah, very nice reddish brown we've got here. And let's load up our brush. Remember, don't go right to the ferrule. Try and keep it on the bottom third if you can of the bristles, and it just stops everything getting clogged up. So we'll start on the back again because we've just loaded our brush up. We may have a bit too much paint on it, so start on the largest area, and there we go. Just noticed something. I think that there, if you could see that, just there, I think that's the edge of the belt. So I haven't actually painted that the fur brown. I'm going to go back, I'll paint that leather brown in a minute. One of the other good things about having a wet palette is any previous paint that you've used, it's very easy to go back. So I'll just leave that for the time being and paint round it. I'm also going to paint round some of the little things here that are on his belt. Again, you can paint over them, but it's just it's less for you to do if you can manage to avoid them. I've painted over one of them there, but not all of them, so it just saved me a tiny bit of a job in a bit. And if I go onto the flesh here by mistake, again, I've still got that on the wet palette, the Barbarian flesh, so I can make corrections as I go. Right, some of this is a bit tricky. So just imagine me sticking my tongue out while I'm doing this. If you're going to stick a paintbrush between Conan's legs, you've got to be very careful. There you go. Bit of advice for everybody there. That's for free. Oh, got a bit on his leg. I'll go over that in a minute. Good thing about acrylics is it's quite easy to paint over. Do try and avoid it though, because as I said, the more layers you put on, the more chance you've got of covering up the detail. But generally, as a rule, don't worry with acrylic. You can paint over it. So I've done that bit, and now the really tricky bit right at the top. Let's try and get a real point on this here. Now this is quite a large brush, but it does have a good point on it, so I'm going to risk it for a biscuit just to see if I can get in at the top here, just where the fur overhangs the belt. Oh yes, there we go. Benefits of what is a new brush and a good brush with an excellent tip. It's a bit easier to see here. There's a bit more of the fur hanging over. Oh, and there's a right tiny little bit in there. Tongue out time again. May have just put a bit too much on there. Oh no, it's alright. It's it had Barbarian flesh on it, but it shouldn't have done. It is actually the top of the fur, not his stomach. Should have guessed it. Conan's not going to have a beer belly, is he? Should have guessed that. So there we go. So that's in there. Back to the main fur. Just at the top of the legs here. And yeah, just let's get it right in there. I think that is fur. On this side. Not a belt. There we go. That looks pretty good to me. What do you think? Alright? I think so. Looks furry. Still got to do the top of his boots, however, because they're also fur. You see what I'm doing? Yeah. Remember, got loads of time. It's a wet palette, so your paints aren't going to dry up on you. Just take your time. If you do go over anything, it's not the end of the world. But the less that you do go over anything or overpaint anything, then the less correction you've got to do. So it's worth taking your time. Everybody say yes, Dad. Ooh, missed a bit there. That's the first one done. Let's get started with his other boot. Okay, there we go. So we're getting nice flat base colours on here. This will all change again. Once we do the shading, you'll really see this guy start to pop. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. We've got his fur sorted out. We've still got his hand wraps. And I'm just going to do some touching up. I've gone onto his leg there. And I went onto, and there's that bit of a belt. It's like the end of a, what's it called? The tongue? Something like that. The end of the belt there. So I'll just sort that out. Okay, no need for you to watch that. And I might actually give the fur another coat. So by the magic of editing, I'll see you in a moment. And I'm back. Yes, did a bit of touching up there, so a few corrections where I'd gone over. One other thing I did, while I had my eye in, I just did his armband there. I did that in oak brown, just so it's very dark, because I want it to show up. So I've popped that in. I haven't done any of the like teeth or bangles that are hanging off it. We'll do those in bone or in metal. But I think that came out pretty well. And yeah, just generally gone round, touched up where I'd gone over places where I shouldn't. And next up, what we're going to do is yet another brown. We're going to do his hand wraps, and they're going to be a bit lighter. We're going to have them a bit lighter than the rest. And we're going to use Monster Brown, which is this light brown here. A good thing to remember though is when we shade our Conan, a lot of these colours will get a little bit darker. So you've just got to bear that in mind, and won't quite be as light. So there we go, we've given it a good shake. Let's just pop a little bit of Monster Brown out. As mentioned, you don't have to have all this many browns. Yeah, I'm going a bit overboard. I've seen people painting Conan on YouTube and they've just used a single brown and it's looked great. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned it right at the beginning, some people use shades as well. They use different strength of shade, and even though you've used the same brown colour, it does look different once the shade goes on. But I like to use different coloured browns. And so let's get some of this Monster Brown, and let's start hitting the camera. After we've done that, I can start painting his hand wraps. So we'll use this one over here. I do think it looks nice if you use a few different browns. It just helps differentiate different details on the model. Especially like with the belt there. It does help show the belt. And where the browns are together, if you can have a good contrast, I think it looks pretty good. Okay, I am adding a little bit of water here. I don't mention it all the time, but every time I'm putting any paint on, I'm either using a bit of water off the wet palette or I'm using the dropper. It's a bit tricky to get in here. Yes, that'll do. Start on the other hand wrap. This is one that's got studs on. He probably uses it to forearm smash people in the face. Because that's the way that Conan rolls, baby. Oh, I suppose he might use it as a sort of shield as well, mightn't he? He might be able to put it up and ward off attacks with it. But personally, yeah, it's going to be the old forearm smash to the throat, isn't it? Steady. and I wasn't steady. I'll have to go over that. There's just a very thin leather strap there, and I blodged it all over his palm. Put the rest of this on. Careful here when I'm at the junctions. Gone over it a bit too much there as well. But it's not too bad. Nothing that I can't fix. Okay, so that is the hand wraps done. Now it does have a bit of a necklace. I'm peering in, but it's mostly covered by teeth. So I don't think I've actually got to put in the leather thong there. I think we'll just get away with filling the teeth in. And once we've put the shade in, it'll be nice and dark under his chin anyway, so I think we'll be fine there. So that's those in. And yep, so there he is with his hand wraps. Those will go a little bit darker once we've shaded them. And we'll put some metal on those studs, which will make them look cool. Right, so that's pretty much all the browns. What I'm going to do now is clean up that palm I've made a mess of, and then I'll come back, and what we'll be doing is his hair. We'll do his hair and we'll leave the metallics till last. So see you in a bit. And welcome back. So he's all dried out, I've done my corrections, and let's get on with his hairdo. He's looking a bit ancient, so let's make him a little bit more youthful. As mentioned, I'm going to be using Necromancer's Cloak, a very, very dark grey. Not using matte black, creates its own problems, but a very, very dark grey. And then we'll do highlights in a lighter grey, and things should be tickety-boo, I hope so. I'll just check this colour as I pop it on the wet palette, just to make sure that it is dark enough. Not really. It's a dark grey, but it's not a very dark grey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tiny bit of matte black onto the wet palette as well, a tiny bit, because I'm going to put it separately as well on the wet palette, because the problem with this stuff is just the tiniest bit can overwhelm. So I'll put a real tiny blob down, and all I'm going to do is, using my, I'm going to wet my brush, and I'm just going to put a tiny little dab on the end of my brush and then mix that in, just to make it a tiny bit darker. Don't need it too much darker, because we will use a strong shade on the hair, and hopefully that will darken it as well. So we've got darkish grey there. I'll have to put extra shade on if it isn't enough. Can we see what I'm doing? Yes, we can. So we'll just pop this on here. Try and be a little bit careful, because it is a very dark colour. So I don't really want to be getting it on his face. In fact, it's going. I'm pleased with the colour. I am pleased with the colour. It's not too light and it's not too dark. Just got to be a bit careful now. Use the paper towel, take the paint off the brush and then put it back and we can sort of drag it off. Tiny bit too much paint on there, but we've managed to take it away with no problems. Got that in there. Oh yes, that's an okay. Pleased with the colour. What you find a lot of times is you'll be putting the colour on and you make a decision, you go, all right, I'll put that colour on, you put it on, you think, oh, it looks wrong. It's not the end of the world, you can paint over, but yeah, it does help if you get it right first time, but that just comes with experience. There we go, just got the other side now. You see that? I'm sort of, oh, no you can't. Try and hold it, it's really difficult because I'm holding him upside down to try and get the inside of his hair here, which is a bit tricky. So hopefully you can see that. But I'm fighting shaky hand syndrome. Had some paint on it, or it hadn't dried. So I think that's his hair. Yeah, so pretty pleased with his hair there. It's not black. It is a very, very dark grey, but it does look better like that than it does matte black. Okay, that's his hair. So we'll leave him to dry again, and I'll be back shortly where we will be doing the metallics. And welcome back. And it's metallics time. Oh, let's give it a shake. These generally need a really good shake because they've got not only got the particles of pigment in, they have particles of like metal to give it the old glitter effect. So you do need to give them a good old shake. Pop a bit of that out. And we'll get painting his sword and his pommel. There are techniques where you don't have to use metal. You can actually use normal paints, but that is real professional stuff. If you want to see that, just put like you know, miniature painting, non-metallic metals, and what they do with like different shades of grey is amazing, and I don't mean the book. So right, anyway, let's get on with getting the old metal on here. Hang on, wondering why I can't see. I haven't put my visor down. Right, try again. I think what I'll do, I was talking about the belt buckle. I wasn't sure whether to do it silver or not. I'm not going to do it silver because it's too close to the sword. I will do it gold, and then we've got a little bit of contrast. There we go, just want the tips of his fingers showing at the bottom there. So, right, and we'll do the pommel in gunmetal as well, rather than gold. It is Conan, he's not too ostentatious. Might have a bit of gilt, that's G-I-L-T, but not too much. Right, so that's the pommel. And don't forget the back side of the sword. That wouldn't do. Okay, so we've got a really nice dark metallic colour on that. As I say, we will brighten it up with some plate mail silver just on the edges and on the top where the light's hitting it, but that's looking pretty good. Right, we'll let that dry as usual, and then I'll come back. I'll just pop a bit of the greedy gold onto the hilt. Now there are, and the belt buckle. Now there are little sort of bangles and things. I'm going to save those till after the next step. I'm going to count those as details. We'll do those at the end. And the next step will be shading. So what I'll do is I'll come back with the greedy gold, do the hilt, and then do the belt buckle. And then we will be ready for shading. Similarly, the studs here, I'll save them till the end. They don't need shading or anything, they'll just be a little detail which will just finish it off. Okay, I'll see you shortly through the magic of editing. Have fun. And welcome back everybody. So let's get greedy gold in. That's what we want. So we get some here. Again, I shook these up, but always shake them up again, it's not going to do them any harm. So let's get the old greedy gold out. Pop a tiny blob onto our wet palette. And get painting. Let's get painting. Okay. Righty-ho. Can we see? Yes, we can. We can see. Hurrah! So, let's get the hilt done. I should probably, there's a bit of white in there. I thought it was hilt, but as I'm painting the hilt, I am not convinced. I think it's actually that fur. So again, benefits of a wet palette. I'll be able to fill that in. It's one thing you'll notice painting miniatures is as you're painting, sometimes you realise, oh, that's what I should have done. But not to worry, it is acrylics, you can go over it. You've just got to try and minimise your corrections if you can. But it's perfectly allowed to still do them. Right, there we go. So that's in there. Next up we have our belt buckle. Can you still see? No, my hand and brush is in the way. I'll try it this way. That looks okay, I think. I might give it a highlight with the very bright gold, just to make sure that it pops. But other than that, we're looking good. And that is the hilt done. Okay, we'll let that dry, and what I'll do is I'll just get in there, and that little white bit that I thought was part of the hilt and is actually the fur, I'll just fill that in. Okie coke. Right, see you in a bit. Hello and welcome back. So here's Conan, and there are a few white bits, but we're going to fill them in the actual detailing stage. What we're going to do now is one of my favourite parts of actual miniature painting. We are going to shade. Yes, we're going to be doing some shading, and we love it. So that's Conan. Now we've got 3 shades. We've got soft tone, and what we're going to use this for is we're going to use this for his flesh. So his flesh tone is going to get the soft tone treatment. The strong tone, that is going to be for the leather. So give that a bit of a shake as well. And finally we have dark tone, and the dark tone is going to be for the metal. It really helps bring out the metallic look. So excellente. Now we're going to have to use one of these, because if we put it in the wet palette, because it's an ink, it's all going to start like disappearing. It'll just dissolve into all the water that's in there. So we'll put a tiny bit of soft tone into one of these. So even though it's soft tone, it looks pretty dark. Now normally I'd use a larger brush, but it's with this size of model, you know, what's the rush? Got no major rush. I'm just gonna try and get rid of those bubbles that are annoying me, and just get a nice big blob on your brush. And then what we're going to try and do is shade him up, and you just notice the difference as soon as this goes on. It'll pool, and that's what we want. So don't be afraid to put it on. We are only going to put it onto his flesh though, so try and be careful. It's not too bad if you go a bit over the leather, and in fact it's good to get some of the shading right in there, because it will help the contrast between the flesh and the leather where they meet. So put a bit on, but not too much. You don't want big rivers of it in all of his musculature, and look out for it to also bubble in. Try and stop that happening as well. As I say, you don't have to be too careful, but try and avoid getting it on the leather if we can. So there we go, and you can just spread it around a bit. And we just want to make sure, get rid of those, stop bubbling. We don't want those bubbles drying on it. So there we go. But as you can see, it's really starting to bring the musculature out now, which is pretty cool. So let's do his legs. And the whole idea of the shade is it really gets into the crevices, and we are upping the contrast. Oh, don't forget his hands. Oh, got plenty in there. So it really makes a difference, the shading. And it's so easy. This is why it's my favourite bit. Not only does it transform the miniature, it's just so easy to do, it's great. So there we go, I've got the other hand to do, haven't I? So we'll do the other hand as well. And soft tone is really good for light colours, which is why we're using it on that. But as you can see, it is darkening him up, so it does look tanned now. It does look lovely and tanned. Just going to wipe some off the brush, so I could just, don't want that much of a big pool under here. And it's run over the belt a bit, so I'm just drying it out on a paper towel, the brush, and then that means we can just lift a little bit of the wash out. Brilliant. I think we could do with a little bit more on his six-pack. As long as it stays on his six-pack and doesn't wander off. There we go. Yes, and what we'll do is, that's pooling a tiny bit right in there. Take a bit of that out. So that looks pretty good. We're also going to use it on the hair. So it'll darken the hair up a touch, which is already a very, very dark grey. Just do that and go over his face again. And that's looking pretty good. I think his legs need a bit extra. I'm just going to give his legs a bit more. The reason for that is they are quite flat. The muscle definition on the legs isn't quite what it is on the chest. So it does need a little bit more shade. And I think that will do the job. Right, shade, as you could probably see, it is very wet. It's very runny. It's extremely wet. So we'll have to let this dry. But once it dries, I'll show it you, and you know, it just looks different again from what it looked like before we did it. Then we'll finish off all the other shades, and we'll see about highlighting. So I'll see you shortly. And welcome back. Here we are with Conan, and yes, he's pretty much dried, and look at that. His skin's come up a treat, and now we're going to do the same for the leather. And for the leather, we're going to use the strong tone. So we'll just pop that, go in the same one. This one's dried up now. So just pop a little bit in there. And we've cleaned our brush, so we can use this. Go away. Bubbles. Oh, annoying. Right, so we're going to use this on all of our leather here. You can see it is darker, and you do also see the effect of shades on the original base coating. It does, even though it runs into all the crevices, it does leave a slight film over the rest, so it does darken everything pretty much. And that's why we have to highlight, to bring it back. Well, in those areas we want to bring it back. There's quite a bit on there. But we'll use the bits on that right hand boot so the excess on that right hand boot, we can use it here. Just trying to get it on the hand wraps here and not the flesh. Doesn't matter if it goes at the junction between the flesh and the leather, because you'd expect that to be dark. And that's looking pretty good for the hand wraps. I think the arm band here looks fine already, so I don't think that needs any more. And we've just got to do his loincloth and belt. There we go. A reminder, these white areas I am going to do right at the end as details. If we do need to shade them up a little, we will. Don't miss anything. Here we get tricky. We're going over the top now. Won't matter if we get a tiny bit on the sword. Dry your brush on a paper towel and then just use your brush to mop any excess up. And we've just got to do that tiny bit at the front. And that's looking pretty good. Go around, use the same method, dry your brush off anywhere where it's pooled excessively. You can just pick it up with the brush. Other than that though, I think we're alright. It's looking good. And that's really bringing out things like the wraps and I don't want to forget, in there we did there's a little bit of a leather wrap round the handle, so we'll pick that up as well. Now I think we will do a strong tone, sorry, the dark tone. I don't think we need to let that strong tone dry. We're only doing this and this. Give it a shake, Paul, don't forget to give it a shake. And then just a very tiny amount of this. We won't need a lot of this dark tone. It's just like a black ink. And this really works well on metal. We want it here on the pommel and on the sword blade. Don't need that much because we did use gunmetal rather than a really bright silver. And I think the strong tone is fine for in there on the gold of the buckle. We will use the dark tone though on the hilt. Oh, there we are. What we're looking at doing there is obviously getting a well-defined mini. So we've got all the shading in there, and as you can see, it's looking much better. But we're going to make it look better again, because as soon as this dries, we're going to start with the highlighting. And that's where you see the real difference between hobby painters and professional painters. The highlighting is where the professionals go like bananas. They go really crazy on the highlighting. Not only have they got talent, which you need for highlighting, well, you don't need it, but it certainly helps. They've got the talent for it, and they've got the patience for it, and they just know how to blend the colours, and they will slowly increment up on the highlighting. So it'll be a slightly smaller area each time, and they highlight it a bit more, and that's how these guys really pop. And if you watch any sort of professional painters on YouTube, you'll see how good they are at highlighting and blending their colours. You don't need to be that good. If you're just going to pop it on the tabletop like we are, then just a couple of highlights will be fine, and it'll look great from 2 or 3 feet away, believe you me. So we'll just let those dry. They take a bit to dry because obviously they're inks. And so back in about 5 or 10 minutes and we will start highlighting. And welcome back. And yes, we are ready for doing a bit of highlighting. First of all, we're going to start on the skin. And the first highlight, what we're really doing is we're bringing back the skin. So we're going to leave the shading, obviously, in the crevices of his muscles there. But the shade, it still gets over the whole model and it still dulls it down a bit. So we're going to bring back everything that isn't in shade, and we'll get it back towards the original colour, and then we can look towards do a second highlight, which won't cover as much area, but we will concentrate on things like the top of the shoulders and where his thigh sticks out there, and the top of his abs, that sort of thing, and the ends of his fingers, his knuckles, and that will really help him pop. So let's get a bit of water and a bit of our Barbarian flesh. Okay, I've got some of that. I've got a bit too much on my... That's better. And remember, when you put this on, the thing with highlighting is you think, oh my god, it's dead light, it's too light. But generally, it will dry darker than what it goes on. So don't panic too much. And we're just looking at those areas. And the shade actually helps you. You can tell where it's really pooling in. So you know to avoid those areas. Obviously it's pecs though, and where they go towards his shoulders. Does look very light, but as I say, it will darken down. But under his arms and places like that, don't have to bother with. If you do make a mistake, you can always reshade it, so don't worry about that either. It's a tiny bit runny actually, but I think we can deal with it. Places like the back of the hand here, they're really going to be light. As I say, this is where the real talent comes in. But the shading does help you out, and if you have a lamp, I mean, I've got a lamp just up there, and you can tell pretty much by just doing that with a lamp where you need to go over. So you've had some's run in there. It was I'm trying to have it a little bit watery because I don't want it to obscure any detail. But it's a bit too watery there. It's run in there, but we can use some soft tone and we can redo that. That's not a problem. Yeah, you can just see it, so it's gone right down the back there where it shouldn't have. We will fix that. So we've put quite a bit on there, but as you can see, it's really bringing him out. So we'll let that dry, and it will dry a little bit darker. It won't be as light as it is, and then we'll put some further highlights just right on the top here, and on his hands, and like I say, the thigh there and the thigh here, the places that are really going to catch the light. Okay, I'll be back shortly. Okay, I'm back. So I've added a tiny bit of white to lighten it up even more, and now we're just going to do these top bits up here, right on top of the shoulders. Don't go over what you've already done, because you need to have the blend. So it goes from dark and then progressively lighter, and if you go completely over what you've done, it'll just look hard. Whoops, done it again. Take most of that there. Just put a little water on my brush. I may be able to just drag that out. I've dragged most of it out. Carry on. As mentioned, yeah, the real professional guys, they pretty much do this ad infinitum, and they get the blends really, really, really close, and it's just really, you know, real gradations of colour, and that's what really makes their minis pop. But a couple of highlights should do for us. There we go. There's a bit more on the back here. That's the top of that thigh. And doesn't look too bad, does it? Conan. Coolness. Okay, I think we'll be able to get on with the hair. So what I'll do is I'll just get the highlight for the hair sorted, and we'll crack on with that. Before I crack on with that, I'll do what I forgot last time, what I forgot to show you, and then forgot to tell you about when I came back, was I did actually do his face as well. I forgot to do it. I forgot to do it on camera, but yeah, you just do the chin and the nose and above the eyes, cheekbones, well, perhaps a bit just under the nose. He's clean shaven, and I forgot to do his hands as well, didn't I? So we'll just do the knuckles and his thumb here on top of the sword. Do these slightly, even though it's under the sword and they're in shadow a bit. But yeah, right. Now I'll get his hair highlight sorted out. Won't be a moment. Okay, with his hair, we're just going to lighten it up with some ash grey. Put a tiny bit into the mix we did before. Remember, we had a bit of black in with the necromancer's cloak. And I'll just lighten that up, because we still want to give, we don't want to give the impression that he's going grey. We want to give the impression that obviously a bit of sunlight is hitting the top of his head, so we have got to be a bit careful. But the main places where this is going to happen is obviously where his parting is. I'm going to get rid of quite a bit of the colour now. Now I've put a bit on, and just drag it down. Just a little bit. I'm using the side of the brush here. I'm not using the tip. I hope you can see that it's just slightly lighter on the top there. I'll do a bit at the front, because that will get quite a bit of light as well. And then what we've got to do is we've got to do just this bit here. Pick out a few places where the hair is actually going to catch the light a little bit, like right at the back here. Again, don't go too mad with this, because you do not want him to look grey. Just a slight highlight where it's going to catch the light. And I think I'll do it. So we're just using the edge of the brush there, and it's like sort of a dry brush really, but not as harsh. I just try to catch the light in his hair, and I think we've pretty much got it there. Yeah, so that's his hair complete. Excellent. Do that. Next highlight, I think we'll do the fur next, because pretty much all the other leathers are in shadow. We will do a bit on the boots and a bit on the hand wraps, but I think it's the fur that needs it the most. So we'll get the colour as was, and that's what we're going to use to do the highlighting. And again, we're going to this sort of edge. We're going to use the edge of the brush in a sort of dry brush way, but we can use our good brush because we're not doing that. We're just sort of dragging it across like this, and it's just to catch. You want it pretty dry, because you don't want it running into the, like it's just done. It wasn't dry enough. Try again. Just want it catching just lightening up where the fur will catch the light, especially at the top here. Use a little bit of the white from over here and just lighten it up a bit. And at the front here, just all the places where essentially the light's going to get it. I think we'll be able to go a bit lighter than this as well. But it's a good little start. So we've brought that up a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more white, because I think we can go lighter still here. Just use the edge of the brush. Really get the top of the boots. Well, the fur at the top of the boots. Don't have to bother so much on the inside, but out here really be getting some sunlight on it. Right, so there we go. Highlight up that fur. There we are, so that's the fur highlighted. And we can move on to the leather. I think the leather brown and the slightly lighter monster brown will do that with the same colour, I think. So again, a tiny bit of the, well, wash your brush first, Paul. It is brown, but let's get rid of the darker brown. So again, a little bit of the white. I'll put it into the monster brown, lighten it up, wipe most of it off on the paper towel, but leave a bit more on than you would leave for dry brushing. Brings it out a little. And just on the boots, toes of the boots, and where they've creased. Right, I'll just use a tiny bit of this on here as well, because that's really going to be in the sunlight, but only a tiny bit. Okay, there we go. Okie dokie. What I'm going to do, that's it, I think, for leather. So we'll do the highlighting next for the metallics. And then we're ready to get on to final details. A bit of cleaning up, because I still need to put a little bit of wash in there where I went over. And always does well just to go around the mini, just see any places where you've made a mistake but you haven't spotted it. So right, we are going to be highlighting the sword next. So we're going to use plate mail metal, which is a bit brighter, a little bit brighter. So I'll put a tiny bit out. Do not need much. And similar again, we're going to sort of do this like edge thing, which is like dry brush. It isn't dry brushing, but it's similar, because we don't want to cover the whole sword in this colour. Just drag it across here, especially on the top. We just want it brightening it up. There we go. Getting a real sheen. I'm also just going to touch the edges at the bottom because the edges do all the work, and they will have got scratched and what have you, so they will be bright too. But we don't go into the rib of the sword there. Top of the pommel will be very bright, so we can have a go at that, but underneath still be fairly dark, so we'll keep the gunmetal there. So there he is, and we'll just do the bright gold, I think. A second. Use the metallic water bottle to wash me brush. Nearly put it in the paint one. Let's just get the bright gold. It's over here. Forgot to get it out. Yeah, we get the really bright stuff. We'll give him a little bit of bling. A tiny bit out. In fact, I should have given it a bit more of a shake. You have to give metallics a bit more of a shake. I'll try again. That looks better. And there, on our good friend the belt buckle. There we go. Tell you what I forgot. Let's get in that silver again. I forgot the studs on his arm wrap, hand wrap. And there we go, they look pretty good. Right, while we're doing little bits like that, we can go on to the detail, because what we want to do is, he's still got his little bone necklace there we've got to do, and he's got some bits and bobs on his armband and on his belt. In fact, I shouldn't have washed off the silver there. There's a couple of bits I do want to do silver, just to change it up a bit. So, what to do? Where are we? A couple of these on his arm guard, I think. Sorry, his armband. So one there. One there. And just one of these on the back. Yeah, just to mix it up. And will do. And for the rest, we're going to go sort of like bone, tooth. So I've just got the skeleton bone out. It's slightly off-white colour. And we'll use that. Again, don't have to use a great deal of it. Tiny details that we're doing now. So what's those on there? Bone ornaments on his armband. And I think that is, oh, one more thing. One more thing. he does have some rings on his boots. Again, I think we'll do those silver as well. Another thing that I forgot to do silver. We'll do it now. Okay, there's just some little rings here. And there's the other. So we've popped those on. So there is Conan. We've still got to base him and things like that. What I'm going to do now is just going to go away, do some little touch-ups. No need for you to see that. Just going to go into those places where I need to redo the shade a bit. And then I'll be back shortly and we'll look towards basing him. Ooh, it's Conan! And welcome back. So we've done some minor cleaning up of Conan. So there he is. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do the base. So in order to do the base, we're going to use some normal wood glue. And just going to pop this into here when it decides to come out of the bottle. So there we go. Blob out. And then we just use a really bad brush, and we're going to get all this onto the brush, and what we're going to do is we're going to put it onto the base here. So bring this over here so I know I'm going to be roughly the right height. So we pop all this on here and put it on. Don't bother too much if it goes over the feet a little bit. The reason is this stuff will dry clear. So as long as you just make sure that none of your basing material actually sticks onto the boots, we should be fine. So we pop that on there. I always find, you know, just leave it a few seconds for it to go a little bit tacky. And put him over there. Then we'll get, I think we'll use this. So we'll just use this, we'll open it up. And shall take Conan. Take him off there, and all we do is we dip him in. So there we go. Give him a good run around and then shake off the excess. And close that, and as you can see there, we get quite a good covering of sand and rock material. And I'm just going to go around with my thumb here so we don't get any on the side, and I'm also going to use it to get any that stick to his boots. Don't mind if a little bit sticks to his boots, that's okay. And that looks pretty good. So that's stuck on there. Now obviously that ain't stuck on like really well. What we're going to do is we're going to let that dry, and we're also going to just keep using this stuff here that we actually put out, this glue, and we're going to add water to it. Just thin it out, make it really thin, because what we're going to do is just going to pop it on top like that. See how it's going on top as a sort of milky film? Can you see that? And this will dry clear. So don't worry about it going on all milky coloured. The whole idea is it will dry clear and it will help seal the base. So there we go, I think I've pretty much got it all there. So there we are. We're going to leave that. When I come back, that will have solidified and hardened clear, and then we'll just paint around the bottom of the base there. Okay, so I'll see you back in a bit by the magic of video editing. Okay, let's go for some final touches. Just have a look here, you can see it's drying nice and clear there. What we'll do is we'll just do the edge of the base, and we'll just use some matte black for that. So just give it a quick shake, and we won't need a lot. Just a tiny blob. And let's get our brush. Wet it a tiny bit. And yeah, we'll just do the edge here. Pop that there, so I know what height to hold it at. And yeah, this will just finish it off nicely. Now, before I did the basing, what I could have done is I could have painted it black first, or I could have painted it any colour. I left it pretty much white. It was sort of white and greyish because of the priming. I wanted the sand to look quite light, and in any of the little gaps there where it didn't actually go on, the white will be showing through and the light grey, and that'll just help give the light look that I'm looking for. So, but if I'd wanted it a little darker, I could have painted the base black, or I could have painted it dark brown before actually putting the basing material on, and that'd have sort of shone through and it made it a little darker. But I'm going for the whole desert thing with Conan, so the lighter the better. I wanted a sort of sun-bleached desert look, so that's what we've gone for. And let's just polish off painting that. Make sure we've got a good coverage. And that pretty much finishes him off. We've got to varnish him, but I won't be doing that in here because that's bad. Varnishing indoors is bad. So let's have a quick look at him. So he looks pretty cool, doesn't he? He's not going to win any awards, but remember, we'll be seeing him from about this distance, and that is plenty good enough. He looks like Conan, so when we're playing the game and we talk about Conan, we know where he is. So that's Conan. We're going to give him that coat of varnish. I just use this tester's stuff. So I'm going to bob outside, I'm going to use that, and then I shall be back shortly. Hopefully it's not raining. I shall be back shortly, and you'll see him all ready for the tabletop. See you in a minute. And here's the finished Conan. A bit inexpertly lit. I'll have to think of a better way of doing it, but it was the best I could do on the fly. So here he is. Spin him round inexpertly with my hand, and there you are. That is Conan finished. So, way, that's Conan falling off. So I hope you enjoyed this little paint through of Conan. I think we'll do Shavatas next, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was cool. So we'll see what the actual editing does to the video, see how it comes out. But yes, thoroughly enjoyed myself this afternoon painting Conan, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And well, that is it for Conan. and I will see you next episode. Until then, this is me, Catweazle, saying toodaloo.